And here's what I would do now, or here's what I would do if the dyspraxia didn't affect me in such a significant way. Because just because my dyspraxia stopped me from driving, that doesn't mean your dyspraxia can stop you from driving. And of course, there are lots of people that have dyspraxia and drive. And just to clarify, I still don't drive, but that doesn't mean you can't drive. Fortunately for me, in work, I'm able to access support to get a job coach. This is a long story, but to summarize it quickly, I had support provided where this job coach can provide transport and other services. And the aims of those services that they provided was to reduce the barriers of the disability. And when we're talking about disability, we're talking about it in the legal context, because dyspraxia or neurodivergence in the legal context is seen as a disability. And in this context is positive because that means that you can get support. Dyspraxia and driving, my journey and the road ahead. So before we begin, I think it's important to establish that I have dyspraxia. I was diagnosed at university. So I think that's an important preface to begin with. Anyway, just imagine being handed the keys to your future only to realize you can't turn the ignition. And I'm talking metaphorically. And in some way that was me, because I had the education, I had the passion and drive, just not the driving ability. For years, dyspraxia stood between me and the independence I desperately needed. But let me tell you, just because the road is bumpy doesn't mean you can't reach your destination. So let me give you a little breakdown of my story as someone who has dyspraxia. So when I qualified as a social worker, so I did a postgraduate qualification as a social worker, I was ready to make a difference, a social difference. I had studied hard, passed my exams eventually, and envisioned a career where I could help others navigate life's challenges. And social work is a very difficult path to take, believe me. But despite this, there was one major problem, or there probably was a few major problems if I'm honest, but there was one significant problem, and that was I couldn't drive. Now, dyspraxia isn't just about being what some would term being clumsy. It affects coordination, spatial awareness, and the ability to process multiple instructions at once, which is actually a pretty important skill when you're behind the wheel. So, when you think when you're driving, you're looking left, you're looking right, and you're processing things. Perception is important, not to be too close to the car in front of you. There's a variety of things going on, even, one hand's on the clutch, another one's on the wheel. There's a variety of things going on when you're engaging in driving. So you're effectively processing multiple instructions at once, and that can be a barrier. And if you have coordination issues, or if you have the variety of issues that can be associated with dyspraxia, this can create barriers. So while my classmates were zipping off to their new jobs, I was effectively stuck in one place. Many of the roles I wanted, or all the roles I wanted, required a driving license. Things have changed now, but at the time, everything required a driving license, even if you wanted to join an agency. And public transport within the social work context wasn't an option. So, you're getting rejections, you're just not eligible to even apply. Of course, the one difference here, or the contextual difference here, would be perhaps a social worker in a hospital setting. And so despite these qualifications, having a degree and then having a postgraduate degree in social work, I was unemployed. I think it was for about 2 years. And let me tell you, it was 2 long years of feeling like I had failed before I had even started. And 2 years of watching opportunities slip away, not because I potentially lacked ability, but because I lacked the one skill that everyone seemed to take for granted. And of course, this compromised earning potential, or any potential. And, naturally my confidence hit a rock bottom because I really, really wanted to work. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to rebuild. So what was my road to independence? We'll just be brief about this because I more want to talk about solutions. So fast forward 13 years, and there's been some changes. I did work for 13 years, or I do work for 13 years, not as social work, but in a similar role. But additionally, I got an additional postgraduate degree in social work assessing, and ironically, I don't do that. And I also did a master's degree in the moving image, and effectively that led to me building my own business, which is actually a social enterprise. For those that don't know, a business can be a sole trader, an LLC, social enterprise, and there are other options as well. I chose a social enterprise, and to me, I proved to myself that one roadblock doesn't mean the journey is over. And let's clarify, there are going to be more roadblocks ahead of my journey, especially we're living in a time of inflation and etc. Don't really want to get into the politics. Anyway, for anyone with dyspraxia who feels like driving is an impossible task, I kind of want to share that, the traditional route didn't work for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work for you. And here's what I would do now, or here's what I would do if the dyspraxia didn't affect me in such a significant way. Because just because my dyspraxia stopped me from driving, that doesn't mean your dyspraxia can stop you from driving. And of course, there are lots of people that have dyspraxia and drive. And just to clarify, I still don't drive, but that doesn't mean you can't drive. Fortunately for me, in work, I'm able to access support to get a job coach. This is a long story, but to summarize it quickly, I had support provided where this job coach can provide transport and other services. And the aims of those services that they provided was to reduce the barriers of the disability. And when we're talking about disability, we're talking about it in the legal context, because dyspraxia or neurodivergence in the legal context is seen as a disability. And in this context, it's positive because that means that you can get support. So for me now, we're going to talk about finding the right instructor, because clearly not all drivers are created equal. So if I was trying to drive, or if I was advising someone with dyspraxia to drive, I would probably look for someone to teach me that either has dyspraxia and or has experience with working with people that has dyspraxia. Because, for people that have dyspraxia, driving can feel like juggling, on a unicycle or on a tightrope while blindfolded. So you need to look for an instructor that has two things: empathy, so they can kind of understand to some extent where you're coming from. But secondly, you need them to have solutions on how to deal with that, because empathy is like awareness. That's where we start, but it's not where we finish. So we definitely need solutions. And they'll need to understand through their professional experience and expertise of understanding your condition or having empathy, that things may need to be broken down differently, that muscle memory may take longer to build, and that parallel parking might feel like solving a Rubik's Cube in the dark. And another thing is that the right instructor will need to have patience, and they're more likely to have patience if they have that empathy and have that portfolio of working with other clients that have dyspraxia. I'm assuming that driving instructors use the terminology of clients. So they need to be able to work with how your brain learns, not against it. Because if you think of it like this, if you have a neurotypical person that has no understanding of dyspraxia and no understanding how to support you, well, this is a recipe for disaster. So I guess for me, one of the biggest breakthroughs that I've had is realizing that, learning isn't a one size fits all. So if you have dyspraxia, the way you absorb and retain information is probably different to someone that's neurotypical, or potentially different to other neurodivergent people. So why would you try to learn driving the way everyone else does? It wouldn't make sense. So what's the solution here? We've got the awareness, but what's the solution? So if you're a visual learner, I would probably suggest to get diagrams, videos, and step-by-step images to map out your driving techniques. Use color coding and visual cues to help remember actions. But maybe you're not a visual learner. Maybe you're a verbal learner. If that's the case, you need to talk yourself through the process, repeat instructions out loud, create rhythms to help sequences stick. But maybe you're not a visual learner, and maybe you're not a verbal learner. Maybe you're a kinesthetic learner. And if that's the case, you'll need lots of hands-on practice, sitting in the car, even without driving, and going through the notions that can help you build muscle memory. Because driving isn't about skill, it's about strategy, or so I'm told. So figuring out what works for you is really, really, really important. And I believe that there are, because your next question may be, I don't know what type of learner I am. And I guess if you're in that boat, and I think a lot of us are in that boat, you can take questionnaires to figure out what type of learner you are. And some people may not be visual learners. You know, there might be a combination of visual learner, verbal learner, kinesthetic learner, etc. So it's really important to take the time to ascertain, you know, what type of learner you are, because then it will be easier to map out a way to achieve the goal. And the goal in this context is trying to drive. So I guess for me, the road ahead, not being able to drive cost me, you know, years of opportunity, but it hasn't stopped me. It hasn't stopped me from trying to build the life I wanted. And I remind myself that slow progress is still progress. And just because your route looks different doesn't mean you won't reach the same destination. And I guess for me, I looked at the not being able to drive. And when I did get into work, I thought to myself, well, because driving incurs an expense, my thing was, okay, the barriers of my neurodivergence is stopping me from driving, but I can turn this into a positive because then I can save more money. And that actually worked out for me. But you might be someone with dyspraxia, you might be a qualified social worker, and you might think, no, I need to learn how to drive. And I guess the message here is, even though I have dyspraxia, and that was a significant barrier to stop me from driving and put me out of work for 2 years, you can drive, because many people with dyspraxia do drive, but you might need to just adopt certain strategies. So I guess for me, it's about finding the right support and learn in the way that works for you and keep moving. And I sincerely hope this video provides value. Now, if you want to watch more videos on dyspraxia, either click here or click there. And if you want to support the channel or learn more about what I'm doing, then check the description box.